Hello, Manchester, and welcome to another edition of Girard at Large. I am your made it through the rain host, Rich Girard. Thanks for tuning in. As you know, you can find us online at girardatlarge.com, and you can find us on Facebook and Twitter, now known as X, also at Girard at Large, where we encourage you to like us and to follow us. Why? Because we have been breaking stories all week long. And that reminds me, I forgot to put up one of the stories that we broke just the other day about Hillside on our Facebook Live post. So we're going to start with that one so I don't forget it. Did you know? I know it should be after dinner. And I should have sent Brendan the picture of the cockroaches that I posted with the article. But Hillside Middle School, home of the Hawks, is now home of the cockroaches. The building has been infested. And unfortunately, parents were only notified of the infestation yesterday. Why were parents notified of the infestation only yesterday? I don't know. It might have been our inquiry. It might have been posts up on Facebook. But Hillside is full of cockroaches. Just thought I'd share. Now, what's the deal with this? Oh, don't you worry. They're working with that crackerjack outfit known as the Manchester Health Department to figure out how to clear it. In the meantime, sources Girard at Large has inside the building say that children who once upon a time were required, more or less, to leave their book bags in their lockers are now being allowed to take their book bags into classrooms. This, of course, is problematic, according to the sources inside the building, because it is spreading the cockroaches, which apparently have infested the kids' lockers, into the classrooms. Now, the memo sent home to parents was all about how they can encourage their children to have the proper behavior in school so that they will aid in the containment as opposed to the spreading of the cockroaches. What it doesn't do is suggest to parents that any book bags, lunch boxes, or other containers that kids be brought to school should be checked before entering the home so that cockroaches caught in a book bag, kind of like lice, don't end up in their home, infesting their homes, apartment buildings, or God knows where else they live, with the infernal, wretched cockroach. But according to sources inside the building, shall we say, the cockroaches are not being really contained all that well. Apparently, breakfast is held in the classrooms at that school, not in the cafeteria. And kids eat in the hallway and in classes all the time, with one person in the building saying, quote, "It's really gross," close quote. And so here's the other problem. And I don't know if I said this already, but apparently the infestation of roaches either predates or was discovered concurrent with the children going back to school. So for 3 weeks, there's been this raging cockroach problem at Hillside, and parents were only notified of it yesterday. Gotta love it when parents are informed about what's going on. God only knows how many cockroaches have caught a ride home on the school bus or walking back from school in the backpack or lunchbox of a kid who left it in the locker only to have it be infested. All right, now that we've got that happy news out of the way, we do have a big agenda tonight. And so because I know many of you are interested, and it's a follow-up, I'm sorry about that. I seem to be caught in the microphone wires here. I don't have time to go off on the station today. But so we do have turnout numbers, the R's, D's, and I's, because the superintendent is less than human. Yes, people on Facebook saying all kids should be sent home until the entire place is treated. Well, they're trying to figure out how they're going to address it, but don't you worry. They've sent home instructions to parents about how, not about how parents can protect their own homes, but I digress. All right, so let's get to the turnout numbers. We're going to put them up on the screen. Hopefully it will be visible, and it looks like it is. So I told you last week, why don't you come back to me first? I told you last week that, in a typical primary, about 40% of the vote will be Democrat, about 25 to 30, and I said, let's peg it at 27 will be Republican, and the balance or so, we'll call it 30, would be would be independent. We actually came pretty close to that. There was some slight variation in the Democrat and Republican numbers, and the independent numbers were pretty much spot on with where they normally are. So now let's put it up. Of course, the big cachet of votes for Republicans anyway came out of Ward 1, the heavily Democrat Ward 1. But interestingly, there were only 390 Republicans who turned out to vote in Ward 1, not exactly a ringing endorsement of incumbent Christopher Morgan. But only 27% of the turnout in Ward 1 was Republican, 42.5% was Democrat, and the remaining 30% was independent. In Ward 2, a whopping 45.5% of the turnout was Democrat, only 28% of it was Republican, and 26 or so percent of it was independent. In Ward 3, 46.5% of the turnout was Democrat, 20%. That pretty much wins the Crater Award for the Republicans right there. 20% was Republican and a third was independent. In Ward 4, 38% of the turnout was Democrat, 29% was Republican, and 32% was independent. So that little higher on the independent turnout there in Ward 4. Than you would expect. In Ward 5, I had somebody tell me that they thought the turnout in Ward 5 was over 50% Republican. Turns out it was half that at 24%. 38% was Democrat and about 38% was independent or undeclared. That's what UND means, undeclared, in Ward 5. In Ward 6, the Republicans started to roar. 32.5% was Democrat, 40.5% was Republican, with just under 27% being undeclared. Ward 7, this was actually a surprise to me because Ward 7 is actually, still a pretty Democrat ward. So for 40% of the turnout in Ward 7 to be Republican was eye-opening for me. 32.5% was Democrat, and 27% was undeclared. Ward 8, a Republican stronghold, 40% of the turnout was Republican, 32% was Democrat, and 28% was undeclared. Ward 9, 35% Democrat, 31.5% Republican, with the balance about 33% being undeclared. That's really about a third, which is interesting for Ward 9 because it is a rock-ribbed Democrat ward, although I think it's really the last bastion of the old-line Manchester Democrats, the ones that, as I like to say, hate the taxes and love the babies, those conservative Manchester Democrats who are typically also pro-labor. In Ward 10, Republican turnout higher than one would expect, with 37%, just about tying the Democrats that were a little over 37%, with only a quarter of the turnout being undeclared. Ward 11, Republican turnout higher than expected or higher than normal at 36%. Democrats lower than normal at 37.5%, with the undeclareds coming in at about 26%. And then Ward 12, Republican turnout really underperforming there versus its historic average, although I think between Ward 11 and Ward 12, where there were a lot of Republicans moved from 12 to 11 in the last redistricting, but still only 36% of the turnout was Democrat and about 33% was undeclared. So overall, 2,599 Democrats turned out in that election, with 611, or fully a quarter of them, coming out of Ward 1. Or 38% of the vote was Democrat. That's a couple points below what you would normally expect to see. 32% of the turnout was Republican, with 2,182 turning out. And while Ward 1 had the biggest Republican turnout at 390, Ward 6 and Ward 8 added substantially to that number, and then the undeclareds were about even. So the Republicans were a couple points over, the Democrats were a couple points under the historic norms, and the independents or the undeclareds ended up being right there. So what does this all mean? Well, I'd say that it means that Republicans, to the degree that anybody was motivated in this election, because only 6,772 people turned out to vote, What it means is that Republicans were motivated to, I'd say, save Joe Levasseur and put Will Infantine over the top to beat Chris Morgan. There's nothing in the numbers here to suggest that Chris Morgan being on the ticket really drove the Republican numbers. I would have expected with Morgan on the ballot to see a bigger Republican turnout in Ward 1 than we got. It just didn't happen. The fact that Ward 7 had a 40+% turnout was being Republican shows me that those working class Republicans, we'll call them the Trump Republicans, really came out, and that was a ward that Levasseur actually topped the ticket on. And the fact that wards 10 and 11 had higher Republican turnout than they normally would have, and and higher than the overall turnout, those are very working class areas too. Show me that that those working class Republicans were out. So the Democrats seemed very unimpressed with their choices in this race. Democrat turnout was down by a lot over the 2023 turnout in that race. It was off by, Ward 1's turnout was down by about a quarter. So yeah, 1,400 people turned out in Ward 1 versus over 2,000 in the last primary. So it was a big fall off, not just in Ward 1, but citywide, which means that Democrats weren't exactly motivating people to get out. Republicans did a little bit better. I'm not sure that you can read a whole lot into this, but the fact that Republicans were a higher than normal percentage and the Democrats were a lower than normal percentage might speak to the desire of people to see to it that Joe Levasseur and Will Infantine made it through the primary as a way of ensuring, as best they could, that Levasseur will be returned to office. So that's my analysis of that there. And because, I can't do any, hey, the votes went here, there, or everywhere else. I could do that in the ward races, but they don't really matter in this primary. But in the at-large races, because you get to vote for two, there's just simply no way to apportion, what votes went where. So speaking of Joe Levasseur, we are going to give you an update on Picklegate. I have an op-ed pending at the Union Leader, which I hope they'll print, but if they don't, I'll publish it myself at girardatlarge.com. But I wrote a very lengthy story. I think we talked about it last week, but I wrote a lengthy story about, what happened really behind the scenes to, over this special meeting and the chairmanship question and Levasseur stepping down or not stepping down. Of course, since we wrote that article, he unstepped down in a release that he sent out, and citing the article that I wrote about what a bunch of liars everybody was about it being an employee issue that required non-public session. The truth of the matter is it never was about going into non-public session to discuss something which could potentially be damaging to the reputation of an employee. It always was about taking Joe Levasseur out of the chairmanship. That's what it was about. It was about coming up with rules for the board to, proper speech rules for the board's conduct, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, because you've got Anna Thomas, according to our sources, telling everybody that Joe Levasseur is creating a hostile work environment and considers his social media commentary to be, quote, harassment. Now, look, you folks know that I am not exactly a fan of Joe Levasseur. We are not, buddy buddies. We're not drinking buddies. On occasion, we do a show together like we have in the past. But the way he goes about things and the way I go about things are two very different things. And certainly we've had our issues in the past. But the fact remains is I will stand by anybody I believe who is being falsely accused or wrongly accused. And I think that's the case here. There is exactly one Facebook post that Joe Levasseur said he took down because he thought it was over the top. I cannot comment on it because I did not see it. However, I spent a fair amount of time going through his Facebook page, which I would have to do on my own because we are not Facebook friends and therefore I do not see his posts, to see if I could get a handle on what the kerfuffle was over his, over his postings about Anna Thomas. And most of what I saw, to be perfectly honest with you, was pretty innocuous. And if her skin is that thin, then she shouldn't be in that position. When he's posting, like the appeal to heaven flag that's got a pickle on it, I'm not really considering that to be harassment. However, he did raise some very good questions, and he did take issue with public statements that she made, both at the Board of Mayor and Aldermen and on various media programs like New Hampshire Public Radio and the Manchester Inklink, where, she said if the Pope were pickling in Manchester, they'd do the same thing. He's like, well, how come no one ever says Mohammed? Why is it always the Pope? Why do they always pick on Catholics? That was the kind of stuff we're talking about. Did he refer to her as a queen? Yes, he did. Did he call her Anna Fauci Thomas? Yeah. And that's a reference to the fact that because she was so unwilling to have kids go back to school in Manchester, that the governor of the state of New Hampshire had to order Manchester schools back into session. We were the last one in the state. And Anna Thomas, who said the blood of dead senior citizens in nursing homes would be on the hands of the aldermen because they voted to open splash pads and city pools during a ferocious heat wave in July of 2020. Yeah, he called her Anna Fauci Thomas, called her a queen. But a lot of it was him just taking issue with what was said and what was done. There was nothing over the top about it, and there's no reason for these games that say, oh, well, and of course, as I reported, right, the city solicitor, among others, was of the opinion that, well, we really should go into non-public session to discuss this because any alderman could say something about what the department did or didn't do that could be potentially damaging to, Anna Thomas or other members of the department. Well, wait a minute. If we're discussing what they did or didn't do and what they should or shouldn't have done, that is a public issue. But the fact of the matter is, it was all about taking Joe Levasseur out of the chairmanship. So he stepped down. We went through this all. He unstepped down, but the city solicitor declared the position vacant and said on October 7th, there's going to be a vote. Okay, it doesn't end there because the mayor, saying that several aldermen have asked him to put this stuff on the agenda, so he did, is going to put two motions on the Board of Mayor and Aldermen agenda for October 7th. One is a motion directing the city solicitor and city clerk to draft language to be added to our rules of decorum, that's rule number 8 of the board, incorporating the spirit of the city's anti-harassment and workplace violence policies found within our current employee handbook and returned to the Committee on Administration for consideration as soon as possible. So now, criticizing the conduct of a department head, a publicly funded quasi-public figure under state law, someone paid for by your tax dollars, they're going to come up with a motion that or rule changes that effectively bar criticism of their job performance. The second motion, as if that isn't bad enough, that neither the Board of Mayor and Aldermen nor the City of Manchester will tolerate personal attacks, threats, or innuendos against its employees or other officials, and that the residents of Manchester can rest assured that the city provides a safe and comfortable work environment for all. Is there anybody out there, the number here is 603-698-3233. Is there anybody out there who's really worried about whether or not the City of Manchester is providing a safe and comfortable work environment for all? And what is a personal attack, threat, or innuendo? Is saying that Anna Thomas doesn't perhaps understand the imposition her regulations have on the residents of the city of Manchester because she's a resident of the city of Concord? Is that an innuendo, a threat, a personal attack? Who gets to define what is a threat, an innuendo, or a personal attack? How is this going to be arbitrated? This is what is known as a prior restraint on free speech, and it is not constitutional. Now, the Board of Mayor and Aldermen has every right, if they don't like the conduct of Joe Levasseur or any other member of the board, to remove them from their chairmanship, to censure them for what they consider to be untoward behavior. But at the end of the day, it's you and me as the voters of this city who get to decide whether or not the conduct of that elected official is within what we feel is acceptable or not. And I have, hopefully, Camille on the phone. Camille, thanks for calling in.
Good evening. I do want to say I find it to be very interesting that we're more concerned about the supposed employees of this school district or this city. However, my son in the second grade is being bullied and no one cares about his safety or his health or his educational environment.
Well,
make that make sense. Math to math.
Manchester, I will tell you as a school board member, a former school board member who dealt with the bullying issue, this district is horrifyingly bad when it comes to bullying. And they very often essentially make it the fault of the kid who's bullied because they're helpless to stop the kid who's doing the bullying. Back in the day when I was in school, if there was any bullying going on, Mr. Christo, the principal at Gosler Park, damn well took care of it. And we don't do that anymore. And I'll be perfectly honest with you. I don't know the situation about your son, but in a lot of what's happening in our schools, a lot of the bullying and a lot of the aggression are coming from immigrants, refugees, non-white kids. And I have had teachers in our buildings talk about how they or the principals are afraid to enforce the code of conduct and hold some of these kids accountable because they're going to be accused of being racist for doing it. And that is a huge problem in our schools. And it's one of the reasons why Manchester schools are considered some of the most unsafe in the state of New Hampshire.
100%, and I would like to say that's not the scenario in my son's incident. However, it is the scenario that a young lady is bullying my son, and because the genders are reversed, all exceptions are made for the bully as opposed to the child that's being bullied. So equal treatment, not so much.
Well, I appreciate the call, and hopefully you can get that matter straightened out.
Amen. Thank you.
Okay, Camille. All right, and so it goes on, this motion, to say, and further that this board has the complete faith and trust in Director Thomas and the outstanding employees of our Department of Health as they work every day to improve the health of our individuals and families across our community. Yeah, when was the last time the Board of Mayor and Aldermen questioned these unimpeachable, impeccable health officials about their handling of a variety of issues, whether it was the norovirus outbreak that sickened 18 and killed 1 at the Puritan back room that nobody knew about until, 6 or 8 weeks after it happened, right? They're shutting down the pickle guy who hasn't gotten anybody sick or killed anybody and making that a federal case when they had a bona fide deadly virus outbreak at a major restaurant that they didn't shut down for a single second while they did an evaluation to determine how isolated or not the contagion in the building may have been, right? And where was the accountability for the horrifically over the top, even by New Hampshire standards, COVID regulations that had our kids out of school so long that the governor ordered the Manchester School District back into classes? Where is the accountability for that? Where was her mea culpa for saying, well, yeah, I guess maybe I was out of line and wrong about saying, senior citizens in nursing homes would be dead because you let kids go onto splash pads and city pools. Where was that? And on this issue of the Picklegate, where is the accountability here? Why isn't anybody on the Board of Mayor and Aldermen asking her why she sent out politically charged emails vilifying the pickle maker and tying him to State Senator Victoria Sullivan? How is that relevant? Why isn't anybody following up on Levasseur lead to ask why it was that she didn't, or her department didn't, pick up the phone or pay him a visit to say, hey, can you tell us what's going on here with these pickles? Why didn't anybody respond to his phone calls? Oh, Oh, and by the way, as I shared with you last week, under the business licensing regulations of this city, section 110.08b, there's an exemption for people like him who are engaged in casual such activities, and the exemption says they shall not be required to have a license. So there's a question here as to whether or not it was proper at all for the health department to act, given the ordinances. And oh, by the way, they told us that they had a policy not to enforce the ordinance on certain categories of people. Who authorized them to ignore the ordinance that they say they're only following in this case? There are legitimate questions here that need to be asked and answered. And all of this, and I wonder whether or not all this noise and fury around what Levasseur said and done is to distract from the fact that they completely, they being the health department, were way out of line on this one, over the top, potentially politically motivated, because they got this guy who did some bad thing a decade ago that's completely unrelated to what's going on now. And oh, by the way, look, he's connected to Victoria Sullivan. Seriously? Oh, and then Ruais goes, I believe it's important for us to show support for all our city employees who work tirelessly to make Manchester the incredible place it is. Look, our job, and Bill Berry keeps saying this, we have to support our department heads. Maybe. Your job is not to be a cheerleader for the department heads. Your job is not to, show support for all of our city employees. Your job is to make sure they're doing their job. And if there are questions about whether or not their job is being done, then it's your job to ask those questions. It's your job to get the answers. It's your job to hold them accountable when they fall short. It is not your job to complain about what somebody, an elected official, is posting on their Facebook page, being critical of the person who they don't believe is doing their job. And I would be willing to bet that if this were to pass, the city would lose a First Amendment lawsuit, and it should, because this is nothing other than attempted censorship. And by the way, not for nothing, this happens on school boards across this state. They tried to impose these rules when I was on the school board. You can't say anything negative or critical. They try to bar the public from saying anything negative or critical about school district employees. They only want you to come up there if you have sunshine and rainbows to talk about, but never if it's anything critical. I'm sorry, these are all taxpayer-funded positions. They are all taxpayer-provided positions. They all are there to, one way or the other, serve the people who pay the tax bill, and that does not entitle them to insulation or insulation from criticism or absolution when they have been in the wrong. This is a wrong-headed move, and anybody who supports it could very easily find themselves on the receiving end because they dared to ask a question or make a critical point or challenge somebody in a way that they found offensive and harassing and hostile, and you said something on social media. Be careful. This isn't going to go in a good place. All right. So switching gears here, the school district has refused to continue. You can get the latest and greatest at girardatlarge.com. I also put it up on Facebook and Twitter, although my Twitter feed has been really active, so you might have to scroll a bit to find it. But the school district, despite saying that the investigation is proceeding well, they refuse to say who they're interviewing. They refuse to say who's conducting the interview. They refuse to say when the investigation will be done. This is about Jason Paige, reminder, the history teacher at Memorial High School who literally sang and danced for joy in his classrooms at the assassination, the murder, the political murder of Charlie Kirk. And they refuse to say what they're going to release to the public when done. Camille, whatever, however you say her name, she keeps saying, oh, it's personnel, I can't talk about it. She can talk about everything that I just told you I asked about, and the fact that they're refusing to do so is an indication that, well, I'm not confident that things are going to go. I have, however, to the good side, heard from people in the building at Memorial that the assistant principals have been pulling kids from Jason Paige's history classes to inquire about his behavior. So I do have some modicum of hope that something's going to come from this. But just like Jen Camille did not answer questions as to when exactly they became aware of the cockroach problem. Oh, and by the way, the school district is just massively screwing up sports transportation. I've got 2 or 3 different things that I'd have to pull off my phone, and my phone right now is doing a Facebook Live that I've been sent by a variety of people about how, they can't even manage to pick up kids for a track meet and bring them down to Nashua without being late. And they're leaving at like noon so they can go from one school to the other, and then get to Nashua, and they're still late. The transportation thing is all messed up over there. I've also learned that the transportation coordinator has been put on paid administrative leave. I don't know what that's about, but I do have that confirmed. And so while they make pretend that all is rosy over there at the school district, it's really, really not. And I'm working on another story that if even half of what I have is true, it's going to be a major bombshell on the school district. But and deservedly so, if what I'm being told is accurate, and we're working to verify it now. But so you got a cockroach problem that you didn't tell parents about for 3 weeks. You have a school, same one with the cockroach. Maybe they couldn't lower the flag because the cockroaches ate the rope. I don't know, but the school district is refusing to answer questions about why the flag was not lowered to half-mast as ordered by Governor Ayotte and President Trump after the political assassination of Charlie Kirk. They're refusing to answer questions of a basic nature about the investigation into Jason Paige. We are now 2 weeks into this. How long does it take? How long does it take for a school district that has as much information as it has been given, particularly by me, about the conduct, all verified, all verifiable, and if you don't believe me, all easy enough to fact check by doing what apparently they've at least started to do, taking kids out of the classroom to ask them what happened. And God only knows what kind of questions they're asking. Are they asking the kinds of questions that are designed to actually, find out what went on? Or are they asking the kinds of questions that they can turn around and say, well, it's a matter of interpretation. It was offensive to some, but not to others. You know how this game goes. But here, and they are refusing to even share, the most basic of information. That leads us on to our dear friend, Jim O'Connell. And I have to tell you, it does not bring me any joy to have to talk about this, and I'm trying to, I just want to make sure that, so we talked about the election, we've talked about Picklegate, we've talked about the chairmanship, we've talked about the cockroaches. I'm trying to remember what I posted on Facebook to make sure I don't miss anything. But that brings us to Jim O'Connell. There have been a lot of reprehensible things said in wake of the assassination of Charlie Kirk. And so when I heard from somebody who watches O'Connell's show after this one about what he said, I was aghast. So I looked it up and I found it and I recorded it. And I'm going to share it with you here today because I think it speaks to the heart and mind of not just Jim O'Connell, but so many who hold the political positions that he does, that he can't bring himself to share, well, you're probably going to hear me say stop the tape, but this is from O'Connell's show on September 11th. He wasn't here last week. Oh, before we do this, though, pictures. while we're on the history class, I want to show you what is passing for history today. B, the black ones, the black graphics. Unit 1, Big History. This is a history class. What is the Big Bang? What is a black hole? What planets are in our solar system? Remember, this is a world history class. What was, I can't read it. And the other is, what is Pangea? Next. Unit 1. Oh, can you read that? This is explaining what the history class is supposed to do, and unfortunately I didn't print it out and I can't read it. But early life. What is evolution? What is the name of Charles Darwin's book about evolution? What happened to the dinosaurs? They were not made extinct by an asteroid. Really? Are you sure about that? What does DNA stand for? Find a picture, insert image, of the animal that most whales evolved from. Most modern whales evolved. This is a world history class. Primates. World history. How many orangutans are in the world? How many gorillas are in the world? How many chimpanzees are in the world? How many... I can't read that one. What's it say, B? Can you read it? I can't read it, but it's some other primate. Baboons. I think it was baboons. How many of those are in the world? Why is this a history class? What else did I send you? Okay, well, I'll have to... The point is, yeah, this is the one where he basically tells parents about a state law that says if there's content you want to opt your kids out of, you need to give him notice per the state law. And oh, by the way, there are LGBTQ people throughout history, and if you can't deal with it, well, we're not going to avoid it. Excuse me? Back to Jim O'Connell. So, now, believe it or not, what I just showed you and the whole thing about Jason Paige actually ties into Jim O'Connell. Now, I'm not saying that Jim O'Connell has danced and, sang with joy, but, well, I'll let you see for yourself how he essentially blamed Charlie Kirk for getting killed.
Hey, folks, good evening and welcome to Education Matters. It's good to have you here on Thursday night. It's that one of those days that lives in infamy, September 11th. And so lost sometimes in the news of the day is the bigger picture stuff that this is the anniversary of September 11th.
Stop the tape.
I know there's a lot going on.
The news of the day was the assassination of a major political figure in the United States, and somehow we are losing sight of the big picture. Not to minimize what happened on 9/11 24 years ago, of course, but do we really need to juxtapose one against the other as a way of showing what is more important than somebody getting killed for speaking their mind and engaging people in peaceful conversations on college campuses across this country? Continue.
I know there's a lot going on in the world that interferes with our sense of who we are and et cetera. These are times for people to reflect, I think, on their values and what they do. Actions are important. I mean, obviously, the shooting of the gentleman Charlie Kirk, which happened yesterday, is a tragic event. Is as part of the political discourse in the it can't be part of the discourse, but part of the political reality in the United States. I think what it tells me is that hateful rhetoric and turning up the pressure has a real effect. And
stop the tape.
And people just
Would Jim O'Connell ever dare to say that women who dress provocatively at a cocktail party or whose skirts might be a little too short walking down the street are inviting the assaults on them? So what it says, while tragic, is that hateful rhetoric and turning up the pressure have consequences. He just said that Charlie Kirk is responsible for his own murder because what he was saying was, quote, hateful and was turning up the rhetoric. Somebody ought to ask Mr. O'Connell, and we're going to get into this in a little bit, what exactly is hateful about the rhetoric of Charlie Kirk? And even if you were to agree it was hateful, do you then turn around, just like if you were to agree that the woman dressed a little too provocatively for the place that she went to, that she was asking for it, essentially? We have to wonder why we have to somehow excuse, justify, or say it was predictable that it would happen. Continue.
People just need to not add to things. I've stayed off of social media. Not that I'm that active to begin with, but I stayed off of social media yesterday and today. But even being off it, I still couldn't help but see people offering opinions, etc. And I have nothing to say that is going to make anybody feel better or worse by offering my deepest thoughts on social media or even here.
Now, first, it's not exactly true that he doesn't do much on social media, but I wonder if the deepest thoughts that he would have to offer are like those that he launched at state rep and now candidate for alderman in Ward 5, Kathy Paquette, who after writing a brilliantly well done piece about domestic violence in the state of New Hampshire and the court system's failures to protect its victims after that lady was killed in Berlin by her ex-husband after being released on personal recognizance bail by a knucklehead magistrate, the same one that let a violent offender go here in the city of Manchester that ended up stabbing somebody shortly thereafter. He went on to Facebook and trashed her as an opportunist trying to, score political points on a tragedy in the North Country. Evidently, it didn't matter to him that in the article she wrote that she herself was a survivor of a violent assault. And I'm not going to tell you what that assault was about. It's not for me to do. You just need to know that it was pretty horrific. Completely dismissed what she wrote about being a victim of violence herself to attack her as a political opportunist. I guess I shouldn't be surprised that this is what happens when hateful rhetoric and turning up the pressure is done. Continue.
Media or even here. So it's not a simple issue. It's a complex issue. I'm reminded
Stop the tape.
I'm reminded that.
Here's how complex the issue is. Put up that one about the graphic about Nazis, B. It's the white one. There you go. That's a classroom. Young skulls full of mush being told they're all Nazis. To the next to it, on TV, they're all Nazis. Bottom left, at the rock concert, they're all Nazis. Bottom right, what do you have? You have some weak-minded kid who's warped by all of the propaganda telling you how the Nazis are marching in America, how our president is Adolf Hitler, how the vice president is Joseph Goebbels, how ICE and law enforcement, no, I want you to keep that up, how ICE and law enforcement are the Gestapo, the secret police, running around in unmarked vehicles without any identification, disappearing innocent people. You've got them lying about using 5-year-old autistic girls to bait the father they're trying to catch, when in fact the father actually threw the 5-year-old girl at the agents and ran away while ICE chased him. What do you expect Is this the hateful rhetoric that Jim O'Connell is talking about? There was another shooting today at an ICE facility in Dallas. And turns out that not only were the bullets marked with anti-ICE, the shell casings, but what did they find in his home but handwritten screeds against ICE, against the deportations, against the President of the United States. Irony here, the mother of this young man had been years prior all over Republicans, all over social media for their failure to pass gun laws. Huh, who knew that her kid would go get a gun and shoot people? Now, was it the gun's fault or was it the kid's fault? The point is, it's not complicated what's happened out there. Every now and then, somebody wanders onto my Facebook page or my social media, or maybe you want to call in and tell me about all the right-wing violence that's out there. Please, please do. I'm looking forward. What, was it a right-winger that drove through a parade in Waukesha, Wisconsin, and killed 5 people at Christmas time, wounding how many others along the way? Nope, Black Lives Matter. Antifa, was it where the right-wing riots burning down cities across the country in 2020? Oh, and please, don't give me J6. If you were actually to watch the president's speech, he wanted people to go there peacefully. And if you actually take a look at what happened, and I suggest you read the book by the former Capitol Police Chief, Stephen Sund, I believe his name is. I read the book. You start to really ask some questions. Why were there undercover FBI agents in there? Who is Ray Epps? How could it possibly be people who marched from where the president was speaking up to the Capitol when they got there, were there already gallows built with Mike Pence's name on it? Who were the agitators? Why can't we seem to find any of them? And oh, by the way, no police officer lost their life that day. There were only 2 people who died. One was a woman who was beaten to death in a tunnel by the police, and another was a woman who was shot from behind a closed door by a Capitol policeman. Oh, by the way, they say, well, no, the government settled that lawsuit for $5 million in favor of the family of Ashley Babbitt. Wrongful death suit. There's a lot about January 6th. So you want to bring up J6, go right ahead. Even if I were to give you that one thing of so-called right-wing violence, the laundry list, including shooting up a softball field full of Republican congressmen, the shootings, the transgender shootings of a Catholic church, of a Christian in Minnesota, of a Christian school in Tennessee. I forget where the other Christian school is. I apologize. Where does this all come from? Give me your right-wing examples, please. Continue.
And I'm reminded that, America's had challenges before. I don't think yesterday's event rises above other major events. 9/11 is clearly a cathartic event, and I think only a very skewed view would see the death of one individual and
stop the tape.
Albeit somebody who's
stop the tape. And I want you to rewind it just a little bit, B, before you bring it back. Once again, minimizing the death of one individual. I personally happen to think that that death of that one individual is on par with what happened on September 11th. Yes, it was, quote, only one life, but why was he killed? Well, Jim O'Connell's got an explanation for why he was killed. It's coming up. And it's sort of a modification on what he's already said, and that was, well, he was killed for his hateful rhetoric and for turning up the pressure. Okay? So we shouldn't pay attention to what just happened. Frankly, I think one of the tragedies of Charlie Kirk getting killed is that poor woman in North Carolina, I'm going to screw up her name. The one who was killed by someone who was out on bail after having been arrested 14 times for violent offenses. Zarakova, Irina Zarakova. I think that's how you say it. Another horrific tragedy caused by stupid liberal policies like cashless bail. where we have no concern for the victims. But, we really should, 9/11's more important. Well, there are lots of theories on why 9/11 happened, and one of them is because the Islamic world just really doesn't appreciate what we stand for here in the United States, our Constitution, our Bill of Rights, our individual rights and freedoms and liberties that are supposed to be secured by the government via the Constitution for our exercise. So if they hate us, if they did that because our society is incompatible with theirs, individual rights don't exist in their mind, should not the assassination of somebody because of their political views by somebody who vehemently disagrees with them also rise to that level? If we look at it that way, what is the fundamental difference between the Islamo-terrorists who want to collapse our constitutional order and the transgendered Antifa activist who would, if not collapse the order, certainly try to take it away from people that he disagrees with? Continue.
Cathartic event, and I think only a very skewed view would see the death of one individual, and albeit somebody who's a spokesperson for the extreme right. But whether it's extreme right, extreme left, I'm not casting it.
He's not casting any aspersions on anybody, but he's a spokesperson for the extreme right. So even in his dour, sad voice, he is spewing the language of extremism and hate. What is the extreme right? Could somebody please tell me what was extreme right about Charlie Kirk? Was it his extreme defense of the First Amendment? Was it his courage in going on to college campuses where he knew people would disagree with him and that's why he went? Was it his giving the microphone to people who disagreed with him first and giving them the opportunity to make their points with him? Was that his extremism? Was standing by science and arguing that there are only two genders thanks to Mother Nature, male and female? Is that extremist? Is that hate-filled? Is it being pro-life and wanting not to murder innocent children in the name of women's health care? By the way, at least half of abortions are of women, little baby girls who will never see the light of day. That's okay, they won't be a slave to the patriarchy, I guess. Is it supporting the idea that you should have the ability to speak your mind? Was it his faith? Now, Jim O'Connell likes to tell everybody he's a Catholic and he is he's a docent and a lector and all these things at St. Joe's Cathedral. Funny thing is Charlie Kirk actually stood by what Jim O'Connell's faith teaches him, but Jim O'Connell is a person who thinks, unlike Charlie Kirk, that boys should be allowed to play on girls' sports teams, that boys should be allowed into girls' locker rooms, that boys should be allowed into girls' bathrooms. Jim O'Connell thinks that it's okay to abort children. Jim O'Connell thinks it's okay for schools to socially transition children without their parents' knowledge in the schools, and if the parents ask, he fully supports the policy in the city of Manchester that requires staff to lie to parents and withhold any information about their children's behavior when asked. He supports that. Who's the radical? Charlie Kirk? Who's the extremist? Jim O'Connell? I don't know. I tend to think more people agree with Charlie Kirk than Jim O'Connell about that, and the last round of elections would seem to prove that, and the next one surely will. Continue.
But whether it's extreme right, extreme left, I'm not casting any aspersions on any of that. I'm just saying,
no aspersions.
In the big scheme of things, we have so many things we need to fix in America, and we could start in our own homes, in our own streets, and right here on Manchester Public Television by lowering the rhetoric and treating people with respect.
Lowering the rhetoric and treating people with respect, like saying, oh, well, there are consequences to your hateful rhetoric when you turn up the thing. There are consequences when you, respectful, like calling him an extremist. No, turning down the rhetoric for people like Jim O'Connell means don't say things we disagree with, and if you do, sucks to be you if you suffer the consequences. You had it coming. Just like the woman who maybe wore something that was a little too revealing, and, well, she was asking for it, wasn't she? There is fundamentally no difference between what he just said and what I just equated it to. Is it turning down the rhetoric? Is it turning down the rhetoric? To say he was a right-wing extremist? That when you speak hate, it's a consequence? Getting shot and killed is a consequence of preaching hate? Whose rhetoric needs to be turned down? Might it be the people who have got folks like, I don't even want to say their names, Tyler Robinson, who lived with a transgender person, who was gay, who was Antifa, who his parents said had become more and more liberal. Today, MSNBC, after the shooting that took place at the ICE facility in Dallas, was trying to say that because migrants were among the casualties, that was actually a right-wing shooter trying to kill illegal aliens. CNN and MSNBC were actually airing those stories this morning. Turns out to be completely 100% false, and I haven't seen any retractions on their part. Yeah, the rhetoric does need to stop. The assault on law enforcement does need to stop. The calling everybody Nazis. What is this history teacher going to do at Hillside if he's in the classroom when the unit on World War II, which deals with real Nazis, what's he going to do? As one of the parents I spoke to said, were they going to equate Charlie with what really happened in Nazi Germany? The only reason why the left can get away with this is because nobody even knows what a Nazi is. Everyone's, oh, Nazi's bad. Yes, Nazis are very bad. Find me a Nazi in the United States of America. If you do, I promise you, just like the National Socialist Party that the Nazis represented, that's what Nazi means. It stands for National Socialist Party. You'll find they're all on the left. And yes, they would do well to tone down the rhetoric. I, for one, will keep on telling the truth. I am your ever humble host, Rich Girard. Thanks for tuning in. Until next week, be good, be well, don't do anything we wouldn't do. We're proud to have in the audience. Thanks so much for being there. Good night.